Subcommittee meeting to order. This Senate Study Bill 3109, bill for an act requiring school districts accredited non-public schools, charter schools, and innovation zone schools to provide success sequence education in grades 7 through 12. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look over the bill. The bill defines success sequence education to be that which addresses evidence-based sequential milestones to be accomplished before having children that help young adults achieve greater well-being, getting a high school diploma, working full-time, getting married. Evidence-based research indicating marriage generally provides financial, emotional, and health benefits to the individual and their children. Evidence-based research indicating children with divorced parents generally have an increased risk of negative physical and mental health outcomes. The bill specifies that schools are to comply and meet the requirements of this bill through their state foundation aid, i.e. this is not a funded mandate. I'm looking forward to the discussion, all sides of this. With that, senators are on the table. Okay, we'll start over here, please.
Margaret Buckton with the Urban Education Network and Rural School Advocates of Iowa. Both are registered opposed. We'll start with a state mandate, unfunded mandate situation. I don't know that this curriculum material exists or that teachers are trained to teach it, so we would have to figure out how to do that, and both of those things cost time and money. I am concerned when it says evidence-based research and then tells you what the evidence-based research says in the law, rather than just saying evidence-based research on the relationship between following this success sequence and outcomes for individuals. I'm also concerned about the many, many children that are in our public school systems who have divorced parents, who may be coming from low income, who may have children while they're in school themselves, and how we handle delivering this information to them when they find themselves in a circumstance that says they're not as likely to succeed. And it reminds me of when we deal with children of low income, we never assume that the system can't educate them or they can't do well, but we have to be very careful about how we deliver that content to them. And because it is not developed curriculum, I don't like the fact that it would start July 1st. We should have at least a year or two to maybe have some samples put together by the department to define what's expected and then to be able to train folks.
Thank you.
Connie Ryan, I'm with Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund, and we're registered opposed to the legislation. Some of the key arguments against what is called success sequence, correlation versus causation. The sequence implies that the actions cause success, but it is equally likely that being already economically secure allows people to follow the sequence. So kind of the inverse of that. Methodological flaws, analysis often exclude groups of people, so they're picking and choosing who are in the studies, including excluding people who are disabled, and in some situations people under 25, so then it skews the data. The role of structural barriers, it ignores systemic issues like racism and classism and economic inequality that make it harder for certain groups to follow the steps. Marriage is less relevant, not in life, but in this step process, so to speak. Studies suggest that full-time work and education do most of the work in taking care of and reducing poverty, while marriage is less of a deciding factor in economic stability. And then finally, step misconception. These are not often sequential. Life is often not sequential. And so you have things that happen like divorce and illness and other things that are other factors, job loss. And so you don't always get to choose what steps are in life, both in terms of adults and in childhood, as Margaret was talking about. So it is widely debunked, and so we would urge you to oppose this legislation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Melissa Peterson with the Iowa State Education Association. We are also registered in opposition for many of the reasons that you've already heard. I would just like to emphasize in the conversation a couple of other elements. This would incorporate this requirement into the social studies standards, which were just recently reviewed and then re-released just a couple of months ago. And what I often hear from our members, regardless of the content, is stop moving the goalposts, stop retraining, or telling us we have to change our standards every single year. While we appreciate continuous improvement, this would be a completely new addition to that in the social studies space. It kind of also tries to combine it with like importance of other life skills, financial literacy, to Margaret's point about something that says it's supposed to be evidence-based and then tells you exactly what it is as opposed to referring you to the evidence. That would go counter to what else is already in the existing portion of that part of curriculum related to those kind of life skills. Our members also have serious concerns about implementing something of this with this nature so quickly without additional guidance, especially in a space understanding the law of the land is House File 802, which prohibits discussion around divisive concepts, including conversation related to systemic racism and systemic sexism. We can get into a whole can of worms here, and so we would really have to want to approach that with a great degree of caution and professional development to make sure that we're in compliance with all of those elements should this legislation move forward. Finally, I would just like to reemphasize the teaching something of this nature while acknowledging many of the students in the classroom represent or are from a situation that is being described before them in this fashion. We would need some guidance on how to do that again to make sure we're not in violation of any existing statute or requirement, while also doing our best not to stigmatize children and cause additional problems in the classroom setting. We just don't think that the classroom is the right place for this conversation. Thanks.
Hi, this is Heather Sievers with Advocates for IO's Children. So I'm not going to repeat what everyone has said, but I agree with all of those things. I also think this is a narrowed focus. I agree that we have to increase life skills training, and I agree like we should be focusing on how to manage adulthood outside of the school setting. This is just one idea. It's an ideology. It's common in America, but it's not required, and it could actually isolate children. And actually, this seems a little bit like it's pushing marriage as one of the most important things, but the literature actually shows that people who get married at the age of 25 or younger, 60% of those marriages end in divorce. So I just think we need to be really thoughtful about what we're doing here, and I urge you to vote no.
Thank you.
I would just, Jana Niblock, and I am an occupational therapist, and I have a PhD in education. And echoing the things that have already been stated, but with my greater concern that it is far more likely that a family with a child with a disability will become divorced because of the strain of managing a child with a disability. For that child to then go to school and be told when they already feel potentially responsible for their parents' divorce is really harmful, and we already need to support those children more. So I echo, if this legislation passes, there needs to be very careful guidance, very thoughtful implementation to not further harm our children. Don't deserve to be stigmatized that way.
Thank you.
Eric Orenson, I represent the Iowa Association of Christian Schools. We are not declared on the bill yet, and we haven't been working the bill because we kind of needed this conversation to decide where we're going to be. So I'll be able to go back to my board after this meeting and decide where we're going to land. It'll probably be either undecided or against. We generally don't support mandates on private schools, especially in these areas where there are religious liberty issues that may come up. And we also are often leery of the state getting involved in these conversations in general, but I'll be declaring on it very soon.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Olivia Krosky. I'm a nurse practitioner from the University of Iowa. And I just wanted to, again, echo what the others have said, and that it's really important in education. I'm an educator as well. It's really important in education to avoid teaching ideologies, as Heather has mentioned, and stick to things that will actually help students grow and learn. And I'll also share that I came from a very broken home with parents who stayed together, who maybe should have been divorced, and I was still able to continue on and get my doctorate and achieve a lot of things. And I think that teaching ideologies like marriage and other things like that as the place to get to in life is not necessarily always right, and it is more of an opinion than a fact. And I'm a product of something that may have been non-traditional, and still ended up being very successful. And so there's just all kinds of stories out there, and this would not represent a lot of those stories if it was taught.
Chuck Hurley, family leader in support. Thanks for bringing this bill. I think one of the main reasons it's here is because just in the recent year or so, maybe year and a half, there's been a confluence between liberal and conservative sociologists that the things stated in this bill really do matter deeply for the next generation. So while certainly this sort of discussion in a classroom, along with other topics discussed in classrooms, has to be handled with grace and care and that sort of thing, and not stigmatizing the child, but giving the child hope that their future and all the kids' futures could be dramatically better based on the hard social sciences. The Brookings Institution is not known as a right-wing group. In fact, 96% of their employees give to Democrat candidates. And so they, along with the Institute for Family Studies, have come together, talked this over, and they found that there's a profound positive impact on young people when they follow this sequence. Now, letting those kids know that could give those kids a pole star, a north star, a direction to head. And so for Iowa classrooms to give hope and help for the next generation, to me, is central to actually our constitutional duty. You can see in the Iowa Constitution that the General Assembly has been given that duty to try to create that kind of improvement for individuals and society as a whole. And then I would also cite that the putting marriage first, this is from the Brookings people, putting marriage first before childbearing reduces the odds of young adults being in poverty by 60%. If a student follows this sequence, their chances of being in poverty, regardless of their background, coming from a broken home or a badly disadvantaged family, their chances of being in poverty are 3% if they follow this success sequence. And so this is really a great path forward. Thanks for bringing it. And it definitely belongs in the General Assembly's duty to do this sort of thing. I would also cite Alabama and Tennessee have passed this, Texas, Ohio, Kentucky, Mississippi, Utah have all introduced it. This is an idea whose time has come. So thanks for bringing it to the table.
Thank you. I know we have a few people online. If you would like to join us, you can raise your hand icon and we will unmute you. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So we'll go ahead with Senator comments. If I see a hand pop up, we'll pause and let you weigh in. Okay, Senator comments? I don't care who goes first, doesn't matter.
So thank you. When I looked at this, the first thing that I go to is evidence-based research. So I'll get to that in just a moment. But the first thing I went to is I found it odd that it would be recommended to be in social studies. So I went to the Iowa Department of Education standards for health education. And on there, all of you have access to pre-K through 12 level standards. And I just am going to talk about, at the pre-K, identify how family influences personal health practices and behavior. So that's reinforcing what we're talking about here. It's repeated in grades 3 through 5, describe how the family influences personal health practice and behavior. And that theme goes all the way through. So to have it show up in this bill, I acknowledge that yes, it is part of the current curriculum now. Now what that looks like, I'd have to go back and look at what school districts are adopting as curriculum there. But then I swung over to the evidence-based research. And I found that interesting because the National Institute of Health, NIHS, actually funded this research, and this is available to all of you. It's Innovation on Aging 2017, and it's from the Gerontological Society of America, and that research accesses 112 articles that have been published from 1994 to 2017. Conflict of interest on this reported as none. So I say that because it comes as about as neutral as you're going to get. I highlighted a couple of things on this because what this report does is it spans marital relationships, gender differences, race and ethnicity, low socioeconomic, directions for future research, intergenerational, same-sex marriage relationships, adult children, grandparents, all the way through. Very comprehensive. And what comes out of this is that it starts with the theoretical explanations that point to the primary pathways and mechanisms through which family relationships influence well-being, and then they describe in this report how each family relationship is associated with well-being and how these patterns unfold over the adult life course. It also says we explore important directions for future research, emphasizing the need for research that takes into account the complexity of relationships, diverse family structures, and the intersections of structural locations. What I found interesting on this is there were two paths that it took. And I quote because a lot of things associated with some of the comments made here is that it's a bifurcated approach. In some instances, it says the marital resource model suggests that marriage promotes well-being through increased access to economic, social, and health promoting. But it also clarifies that high-quality marriages. But then the stress model that they reference in here, that negative aspects of marital relationships, such as marital strain and marital dissolutions, create stress and undermine well-being. It goes through and it talks about all of these relationships, and the bottom line was, I highlighted a bunch of stuff in here, and I thought, well, what's the summation? The conclusion was relationships with family members are significant for well-being across the life course, and as individuals age, family relationships also become more complex, with sometimes complicated marital histories, varying relationships with children, competing time, pressures, and obligations for care. It also goes in here and it talks about some of the difficulties between genders. It talks about in here that males often are more beneficial on that in the marital relationship than females, and they give an explanation why. With childbearing, stresses related to trying to have a job at the same time, lack of access to quality child care, underfunding on jobs in which you're fully employed, but the pay that you're getting is so low that it doesn't allow you to meet those relationships. The summation was this is complex, it's hard, and that a one-size-fits-all that would seem to be reflective in this bill would not be something that we would want to enter into because the evidence base is complex. There's a lot to this, and so I just thought I would share that. Senator Evans, you know that I dig into this stuff, and so I started doing some research to say, well, what does it say? Because I'm not dismissing the first portion of it, but as Paul Harvey, for those of you who are old enough for that, and now the rest of the story, and that's what I was trying to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing us forward. The one thing I have with a lot of these bills is we've made a lot of changes, substantial changes to curriculum and stuff like that. And I've been hearing from a lot of superintendents about delaying a year on implementation and the necessity for them to comply accordingly and develop good standards and stuff like that. But overall, I understand where the spirit of this bill, where it's coming from, and I'll always support it to go to committee.
I'm gonna go back to online. Is there anybody that maybe got skipped? If you want to raise your hand icon, I don't want to shut anybody out of the discussion. Okay, seeing none. Now, this is a Senate study bill, which means we are studying the issue. And we're studying a lot of pieces of it, so I have read into some of the evidence that was provided. It's interesting stuff. I agree, I'm not necessarily sure it fits with social studies. We already have curriculum and standards in place that it would be a good fit in health and even in your family consumer science strands. I am a little concerned that we consistently get bills the last couple of years that want to add to graduation requirements. We're going to soon be having 5-year high schools if we keep adding graduation requirements without removing something. And then no one wants anything removed. So we have to be sensitive to that and implementation process as well. Anytime you're moving pieces that may require some additional materials or teacher training, I think you need to slow down the implementation a little bit. I am intrigued by this very much. Whoever made the comment around the room that divorce rate increases when you marry young, I don't remember who that was. Please don't suggest that to my wife. Don't put anything into her head. We married young. But, with that, I want to continue the discussion. So we're going to move forward. We're getting really close to that final deadline. So I'm making no promises that we're going to get inside of it. But it certainly is worth some serious discussion what that looks like. I would like to hear back from private schools as well. I know you haven't had time to dive into it much. So thank you very much. There was an author that was going to join us today. At some point in time, I would like to talk to that person, if you don't mind. Yeah. So with that, that ends our subcommittee. Thank you for attending. Appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Evans, would you take a quick follow-up question? My mother died at a young age. I mean, as far as I knew, I was the only kid in my whole elementary school who didn't have a mother. I mean, what is your response to the idea that kids who are in these family situations, that this kind of curriculum would say is less successful, that could be stigmatizing for kids who maybe already feel a little bit of stigma because of their home situation?
Sure, I think anytime we're dealing with family development, child development topics, especially in health education, that's one of the things that I actually teach, believe it or not. You have to approach it with a certain sensitivity that you're not necessarily painting those individuals that are maybe in different life experiences in a bad light, that you take a balanced approach in how you present the information.
And
Does
how
that make
do
sense?
you feel like this would be a balanced approach? Because I'm not an expert on this thing, but
I'm-
it sounds like it would really be drilling into the students.
I'm still studying the issue.
Oh, okay, all right. Well,
I'm
thank you.
not to the point, give me a little time, I'll have a better interpretation of what's actually in there.
Okay, thank you very much.
But knowing that we're getting close to the final deadline, we need to have the subcommittee.
Thank you.